Hey there, YouTube. Now that I've gotten your attention with the title, before I dig into it, I'd like to give a little overview on what this channel is and is not intended to be. First and foremost, my intention is geared towards helping women to foster strong, healthy connections inside of their marriages and long term relationships, as well as helping us to build up a sense of empowerment and emotional resilience, which will allow us to do the necessary work to achieve this vision over the long term. This channel is not designed to shame women in any capacity. I'm rooting for you. I see a lot of channels, mostly geared towards men, often even run by other women, who primarily deal in shame based tactics. It sets an adversarial dynamic between spouses where one is pitiful and neglected while you are a villainous and overbearing cold fish or some such. While I wholeheartedly believe that individuals caught up inside of low or no intimacy marriages deserve and need a space to discuss their own issues and feelings, these channels often do not accomplish much in terms of actually addressing the issue in any meaningful capacity. So, in a world which champions apathy, complacency, helplessness, and duplicity, I'm here to tell you that it is okay to want your marriage. It is okay to fight for your family. It is okay to treasure what you already have and seek to better your relationships. It's actually better than okay. It is good to opt for loyalty and commitment over simply allowing your marriage to atrophy and wither away into a cold husk of nothingness. And I would even go so far as to say that we have a responsibility to do so. Dirty word, I know. But what I want to do here is simply to give normal, everyday women, mothers, daughters, sisters, aunts, and grandmas practical advice that will uplift and empower them to help foster greater connection and intimacy inside their marriages. We're all friends here, willing the good of one another in a spirit of love and charity. Yeah? Fantastic. So now that we have a little bit of an idea of what we're going for here, let's go over what this channel is not. This is not, and I repeat, not a dating channel. If you are a single woman or a woman who's maybe seeing a guy, but he hasn't really committed to you yet, this advice is not for you. I do not recommend in any capacity trying to build up and foster the level of connection and bonding for which I'm advocating towards a man with whom you do not feel secure. And while this is a pro-marriage channel, it's not death before divorce. If your spouse is cruel, unfeeling, belligerent, or puts hands on you, under no circumstances do I advocate for a woman to sacrifice her literal health and safety for a man who will never love and cherish her the way a husband should. I am addressing the women who are currently in what is, for all intents and purposes, a safe, stable, and functioning relationship that has, for whatever reason, devolved into the dreaded roommate stage. Because let's face it, ladies, a marriage without sex is just a friendship. And sometimes it's not even that. But you are here because you're not ready to give up, because you want more out of life than a whitewashed tomb of a marriage. And you can have this if you're willing to put in a little effort. So what are my qualifications for telling you all of this? None. Not really. I'm not any sort of psychologist or therapist. I'm not a best-selling self-help guru. I have no real accomplishments or accolades in any of these overlapping fields of study. But I am married, only once, and happily so. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary this summer, 11 years together total, and it hasn't always been easy. I especially haven't always been easy. But my husband has always been patient and loving towards me, which has thankfully allowed me the space to figure out a lot of things, which I've then been able to channel into building up and prioritizing a marriage, which will continue to withstand whatever lies in store for years and years to come. Okay, so with all the fine print out of the way, where do we start? What can we do when we find ourselves in a situation where the intimacy is dwindling or has long since dwindled away? And I say intimacy specifically because I'm not just referring to sex. Although sex is obviously a very major and inextricable component to all this. Intimacy refers to closeness, a desire to be near and connected to your husband. You want to be able to look at him and feel something, right? Because I don't believe the wives in these sorts of relationships thinks it's actually ideal, but there's not a lot of useful, applicable advice out there besides, well, just have more sex. No, that is not where we're going to start our journey. In fact, for like the first 30% of walking this road, You're going to set the concept of your marriage or relationship aside entirely, okay? Because this next part, you got to do it on your own. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but bear with me. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that if you're here, you've already cleared the first major hurdle, which is accepting that the lack of intimacy inside your relationship is in fact a problem. And it's a big problem. So from this starting point, you will need to take some serious inventory of your relationship and your current physical and mental state. This isn't about finding excuses to fall back on or more reasons why we just can't. It's about finding the concrete things that we can accept responsibility for and subsequently do work on. Humans are social creatures. We are born craving touch and connection and affection and intimacy. If you find yourself in a place where you are not interested in these things, that should start ringing some alarm bells that something is out of sorts. You're not bad, you're not broken, and you're not a lost cause, especially if you had no issues searching out intimacy in the past. So we need to ask ourselves, why am I hiding from intimacy? What is going on that has caused us to forego such an integral and beautiful aspect of human nature with the one person who's able to offer it? And what can we do to help correct it? Well, the good news is that you are a fully grown adult human being with the gifts of logic and reasoning and a presumably fully intact cognitive function. You're not a plastic bag blown along in the wind, irredeemably subject to fleeting and volatile feelings and circumstances. Even when things are hard, even when you feel stuck, even when every corner of the internet would tell you otherwise, you still have agency. And I'm saying that as someone who has wrestled on every single one of these points in some capacity or another. So your first area you ought to address is your physical health. I'm not a doctor, nutritionist, or endocrinologist. So this will be a brief list of things that I would encourage you to explore with your primary caregiver if you feel that they could be contributing to whatever has led you to this video today. A big thing to consider is any medications, hormonal birth control, or medical issues, whether endometriosis, fibroids, ovarian cysts, thyroid issues, vitamin deficiencies, etc., that could otherwise be disrupting your natural hormonal cycles and balances. These systems are so fragile, but also play a massive role in our levels of attraction, desire for intimacy, and sexual arousal. Then, diet and exercise. I know this one's not fun, but out of all these things I will list, these two are the most readily controlled. I'm not saying you need to drink green smoothies and do a 5-mile run every morning. Lord knows I don't. But I would encourage you to take a realistic look at your overall habits and take steps to better yourself. Sometimes we just let ourselves get into a space where we stop paying attention to ourselves, stop trying to feel good anymore, and instead drift along aimlessly through the tidal waves of life. I get it. Work, life, motherhood. We put ourselves on the back burner. But just some extra protein, some naturally occurring vitamins, and an extra 5,000 steps a day out in the sunshine can go a long way to improving your overall energy levels and sense of well-being. Next, you'll need to take stock of yourself emotionally. I know a lot of us women struggle with anxiety and depression. Believe me, I'm no stranger to these things. And if you need outside help, I encourage you to pursue that. But whatever lies at the core of the issue, whether it's insecurity, trauma, or a mental health diagnosis, please do not ignore yourself and remain passive to the issue. I know that many of these things are uncomfortable or even painful to explore, but there is freedom and empowerment to be found in overcoming these chains, which hold you back from experiencing the joy and vibrancy which is only found in genuine human connection. You're not these things. You do not have to let them define you. You are not a label. You are not broken. You are not beyond hope. You are a woman, a beautiful human being with inherent worth and dignity and gifts who deserves to love and be loved by their spouse. And I want you to take ownership of that, all right? Okay, so how do we take ownership of our intimacy? And why do we have to set the idea of the relationship aside for the time being? Because in order for this to be a sustainable, long-term commitment, you need to be invested in you. You need to be getting something out of it, speaking from a connection and intimacy standpoint, not because you want him to do the laundry tomorrow. And you need to know what you want. What sorts of things get you in the mood for intimacy? Because ladies, if you're sitting around waiting for lust and butterflies 6 months into a roommate situation inside a 5-year marriage with 3 young kids, It's not going to happen, okay? It's not. You're not going to get that fix of fantasy and limerence from that man. The mystery is gone, but the spark doesn't have to be. You need to take time, alone time, to set aside and simply explore your mind. What turns you on? How do you crave being touched? What does the ideal sexual experience look like for you? What fantasies do you like to read or daydream about? Okay? Do not shut down the side of your psychology. I know we women are great at compartmentalizing. We wear many hats: the work hat, the mom hat, the maid hat, the wife hat. We view ourselves in the context of our roles and services we provide to others. But my friends, this is damaging you. It has taught you that your desires and needs are secondary, that they are performative at best or shameful at worst, that you need not be anything besides a passive receptacle for your man to use to get off as quickly as possible. That is not intimacy. That is not connection. That is not the sort of sexual experience for which I'm advocating, and you deserve better than that. So take the time to get comfortable with your own vision of sex and intimacy and your own arousal and desires. Embrace them, explore them, learn to articulate them. Let yourself be turned on and excited by them. Because the more you allow yourself to be open to wanting these things, the more you will want these things. And once you get comfortable being in that headspace, then you can move forward with reintroducing the intimacy into your marriage in a way that actually feels good. Now, with all that being said, since this is more so an introductory video to the channel, I'll just sort of gloss over the starting point of this practical application. We're still on that first 30% of the journey, all right? So you're really just going to focus on feeling better about yourself, about your life, about intimacy in general. This isn't about using sex as a water seal on a failing marriage. We're going to build better habits, like I mentioned earlier. Baby steps, y'all. Momentum is built up over time. Don't go 0 to 100. It's not sustainable or practical, which is what we're going for. So work on moving away from those poorer lifestyle habits. Incrementally healthier diet, incrementally more exercise, incrementally less distractions and screen time. Doom scrolling social media has fried your dopamine receptors, my friend. We need to detox from that. Work towards a mindset of gratitude and being present, even if it's just the first or last 5 minutes of your day. Because like I said, we're just starting out, building little habits over time that will give us the momentum to really pursue what we're after, which is a strong relationship where intimacy is both desired, given, and obtained. We want to work for a more intentional mindset. Back to that plastic bag in the wind analogy. We spend so much of our lives reacting to things around us or running from wounds in our past. We just do the things which come most naturally to us without really reflecting on why or caring whether or not these things are conducive to our own happiness, as well as the health of our relationships. And for a lot of us, they aren't, because our visceral responses to things which defy our expectations usually include feelings like irritation, boredom, and resentment. But we're going to be intentional, all right? I chose this man. I married this man. And I'm not going to give up and send him to the pound like a naughty dog. This isn't about burying your feelings. It's about learning to spend our mental and emotional energy wisely, learning to manage our expectations, not just for the sake of our marriage, but for the sake of our own inner peace. Does it drive you nuts when he leaves dirty socks on the floor or leaves the toilet seat up? It might, but we're not taking inventory of those things anymore. I'm sure we've all done that plenty. That's why we're here. So right now, we're going to make the pledge to love this man despite all those things about him you maybe don't find especially charming. This is about working to eliminate the strings and unrealistic expectations we may have come to attach to intimacy within our relationships in the pursuit of something far greater. So we're going to actively choose to afford our spouse the same level of patience and grace we'd like in return, and set aside all those little but not actively detrimental annoyances in order to focus our attention on more productive pursuits than constantly scouring the house for perceived slights against us. which is not, like I said, just mindlessly throwing more empty sex at the problem. Because if your main complaint is a lack of overall fulfillment and boredom with your relationship, more passionless duty sex is not the answer. You need to pursue healthy habits and cultivate a vibrant inner world of your own, whether that be through creative outlets, intellectually stimulating pursuits, physical activities, some sort of faith based practice, whatever that looks like for you. But find things you enjoy and find meaning in that don't necessarily involve anyone else. If you feel socially and emotionally empty and unfulfilled, you're going to be trying to pour from an empty cup. I know that when we've arrived in this space, we'd rather be rescued. We want our husband to swoop in and be our emotional punching bag and dumping ground and therapist all at once. But unfortunately, that is not the emotional landscape a low intimacy marriage fosters. And then we get caught up in these negative feedback loops of punishment and avoidance where we begin to almost feel like separate and incompatible species in terms of our desires and expectations, i.e., cats and dogs. But we can't sit around mindlessly and passively relying on our spouse to rush in like Superman one day and fix it all for us when that obviously hasn't been the reality so far. Especially if we haven't even begun to explore who we are and what we actually desire in order to be productive and constructive partners in our marriages, rather than despondent, directionless, and empty inside. So we need to be okay all on our own. I don't mean permanently or financially or anything drastic, but we need to be able to sit down in an empty house for a while and not be miserable while we're alone with ourselves. We need to be whole and complete people in our own right, or at least working on getting there. Because this isn't about chasing validation or manipulating a situation so that you can make up for some lack or a perceived sense of personal inadequacy. This is about becoming the best women we can be on our own 2 feet so that we are then able to effectively give and receive the sort of love we ultimately desire. Now, with that 30% of the journey all laid out, where can we actually start in terms of reintroducing or increasing intimacy in our relationships that doesn't become overwhelming or unsustainable in the short term? The first thing I would suggest is don't openly share these intentions with your husband, at least not until you've established a bit of rhythm and consistency, okay? It will just set you both up for a transactional mindset, which is the opposite of what we want. You will be encouraged to view it as an emotional bargaining chip for validation that you are wifing better, and he will begin weighing every kiss and touch and night in bed like grains of sand to see if you're satisfactorily holding up your end of the deal. So keep the cards close to your chest. This can be a lot of fun, playing into the mystery and fantasy of revitalizing your intimacy if you allow yourself the freedom to just enjoy the journey. Which is the other part. It is a journey. The goal is not to speed run how fast you can achieve wild and crazy sex 3 times a day, every day for the rest of your life. The goal is greater connection and intimacy rather than trying to meet an arbitrary sex quota, which is a massive sandbox of freedom you have to play around in. And there will be plenty of room to open up these lines of communication in the future once we've been able to shift our perspectives towards intimacy into something more enjoyable and positive. So to wrap this all up, once you've gotten to the point where you're really looking to reforge that connection, you'll need to set goals. Easy, doable goals that set you both up for success and a positive experience that you'll want to repeat. I encourage you to start from a place of gratitude. Find reasons to love your man today, whatever it is, whether he's a hard worker or a good dad or he fixed the leaky faucet yesterday. Find something in him worth appreciating every single day. Keep in mind that, back to our title, boring is good. A man who goes to work, comes home, plays with the kids before dinner, and more or less is a decent guy is good. Stability and commitment and tranquility are good. If you want titillation and excitement, read a novel, watch a K-drama, or some other outlet. After that, we're going to start being a little more intentional with our time. There's that word again. I know life is busy, work and kids and schedules, but we make time for what's important to us. Sometimes that means we'll have to shift priorities around. Sometimes that means we have to step back from the things or the people in our lives that are draining us rather than being a welcome addition. But our first baby step here is going to be the 3-3-3 rule. Take 3 minutes to intentionally and charitably, as in not expecting something in return for your efforts, give your attention to your husband the first time you see him in the morning, when you see him after work, and before you go to sleep at night. Make eye contact. Be engaging. Check in on him. Give hugs and kisses, whatever. Just those very normal behaviors that signal care and attentiveness towards our loved ones. You don't need to dress to the nines and do backflips to impress him. You just have to love him. I promise you, he'll notice. And finally, yes, you will have to. No, I don't want to phrase it that way. You will get to have sex with a man who loves and desires you, which is a beautiful thing in the current romantic landscape of meaningless hookups and non-committal situationships. So here, we're going to back up to all that mental work we did on our own earlier, getting more comfortable with our own sexuality and desires, regardless of whether or not those particular thoughts are something you're actually ready or want to pursue in a real-life intimate situation. You still can and should channel that energy, channel that mindset, because a lot of women have a reactive libido. If you do not naturally feel that drive, you're going to have to take responsibility for waking yourself up a little bit. Get yourself in the mood. So if we're coming out of a dry season and we've consistently hidden ourselves away from intimacy for a time, this can feel daunting, especially if you're the anxious planning type. But this will help you because you're taking control. Not being controlling, but you're going to take the lead and set the pace a little bit, yeah? You're going to have to take some initiative. You're not a passive sex robot, and your pleasure matters. My advice to start with is to pick a day, whatever day of the week is least stressful or busy for you, and designate that as sex day. I know that doesn't sound very romantic, but it can be a lot of fun, like I said, if you allow yourself to enjoy the journey all the way through, not just focusing on arriving at the final destination of your husband's orgasm as quickly as possible so he'll stop bugging you for another few days. Now, because we've already decided that we're going to have sex on Thursday or whatever, you've already taken that pressure off yourself. That vicious feedback loop where you withhold touch or attention or flirting because he gets excited when that's not what you had in mind. But that is what we have on mind on sex day. So you can touch and flirt and play because turning him on and fostering that physical connection is the goal. I really encourage you to enjoy yourself in the little things leading up to the main event. Building tension throughout the day, the excitement of knowing he desires you and responds to you while trying to keep your expectations for the night flexible and open, especially if you've gotten to the point of discomfort or resentment with certain aspects of intimacy in the past. Remember, we're being intentional and charitable with our affection because we're working towards a goal. So all this buildup, all these little sparks and touches, or however you want to go about this particular leg of your journey, though I'll have more practical advice in later videos, will release all that oxytocin and feel-good chemicals which you've been depriving yourself of. And after, when the fireworks are all settled, that's when you can really take advantage and seek that emotional closeness I know many women are missing in their marriage. Because once he's had that need satisfied, that drive fulfilled, he enters the refractory period. Now you can really focus on those more tender things. The soft touches, the snuggling, the conversation, whatever your favorite flavor of Kool-Aid is. Because for at least 2 to 3 hours for the average guy, he isn't thinking about sex anymore. And over time, if you commit to making these small, doable, and consistent changes on whatever schedule in whatever capacity works within your own relationship, remember, this is just simple advice from someone who's lived and still lives marriage every day, not a prescription written in stone, you'll be able to actively reframe your own connotations surrounding sex and intimacy by forming a positive feedback loop rather than the aforementioned negative. And you'll also condition yourself to actually want more of it over the long term. So I'll leave off here before this gets any more excessive for what was initially just supposed to be an introductory video for the channel. But I hope that some of you found this helpful, that you found solace in knowing that you're not alone and that someone is cheering for you. And I hope that you feel encouraged enough to start making positive changes for yourself so that you can achieve a marriage or relationship that is full of love and affection and connection with one another. So take care, ladies, and until next time.